Welcome to the Fabric of America, the podcast that celebrates small businesses and the remarkable stories that weave our communities together. We're your hosts, Melissa Otto
and Matt Banover.
Matt is a fashion designer passionate about storytelling through style.
And Melissa is a seamstress on a mission to make sewing cool again and inspire the next generation. We sit down with small business owners, artisans, and dreamers to uncover the stories behind their brands, what inspires them, challenges them, and keeps them creating.
Because we believe that behind every idea, every design, every stitch, there's a story worth sharing. So grab a drink from your favorite local shop and join us as we weave together conversations about passion, perseverance, and the power of small business.
We sat down with somebody who I've worked with a lot, and you just got to meet, Jacob Harrison Long, who owns American Woolen.
That was like a dream come true for me because you've talked about him so much, and he is so intertwined in what both you and I do and what you and I believe in as far as what our like life's purpose and mission is in bringing back, made in America, educating people on where their clothing comes from, all those good little bits and pieces. He is that guy. He's doing it.
Yeah, he's very focused on creating a local economy is how he calls it. If you go on his website, if you go on AmericanWoolen.com, it's all about this local ecosystem. And he has this grand vision for clothing and textiles, but he does it on a local scale, which I think is so beautiful.
It's fascinating. And it's the information that he shared with us was so mind-blowing.
Yeah.
From how far it takes a garment to travel if you're buying from like a Banana Republic or a J. Crew, things like that. Stuff that you never think about the impact that your clothing has on the big picture of the world and the global scale.
You can tell he lives and eats this problem
100%.
and solution. He's got information at the ready. So here's our conversation with Jacob, who owns American Woolen.
All right, listener, welcome back to another episode of the Fabric of America podcast. My name is Melissa Otto, owner of Demelis Atelier.
And my name is Matthew Banover, owner of Bards. And with us, the legendary, the iconic, please introduce yourself.
So my name is Jacob Harrison Long, and I'm the president of American Woolen Company in Stafford Springs, Connecticut.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
This is such an honor. Melissa and I were so excited about that you just jumped at the opportunity to come down and sit with us because obviously you're a busy guy. You have a million things. So thank you very much. But right now we got to talk outfits.
Outfit time.
And I feel like I like the brown and black.
Yeah, we kind of all went in the brown
this.
way.
This is pretty cool.
I actually almost went all black. So I'm glad that I
dig it. What do you got going on?
Okay, so I have this really awesome jacket that I got from when I used to work at DKNY. It's probably about almost 15 years old, if not 15 years old.
That's awesome.
Leather, kind of like a nice brown leather sleeve. Yeah, I really liked that it had the chevron kind of wool paneling on it. So that was why I specifically chose it to wear today. And then I have this Dirty Honey, their band t-shirt. We saw them open up for the Black Crows.
Yeah.
So I just really like the t-shirt because I like the 70s kind of vibe and style. So that was why I bought that. And then I have on my Levi's that I've had on here before. And then my little Gucci pumps. These are the ones that I have two pairs of because I love them so much. And one is like for working and one is like the keep them clean shoe. So this is the keep them clean shoe. They stay here. They don't leave. They don't go outside. Yeah. I can wear them in front of customers. I can step on a wedding dress by accident and not have them be dirty. So those are my clean shoes.
I like your necklace also.
Oh, thank you. What's the name? You're going to have to read it on there.
Oh, God, I can't read that. Oh,
it's something with an R. We'll put it in the show notes, but it looks like kind of a punk rock safety pin.
Yeah.
Instagram got me on the ads on that one.
It happens.
I know.
It happens.
And I
hate when it
got
happens.
it, and I was like, ooh, did I make the right decision? But I feel like I end up pretty lucky in my random Instagram ad purchase.
Yeah, and like the thing is like we talk about this all the time. We're not talking to like stop all Instagram purchase. It's just like that shouldn't be your default.
Right.
I need something, buy it on Instagram.
Oh, they totally got me on that one on a
like
total fluke.
Yeah, I've got stuff on Instagram also, but it's like one or two things a year. Just change of mindset.
Also, how much you wear it. Like my that Sesame Street skirt. Have I worn that one yet? here on the
I think
show?
you did once. Yeah.
I feel like I did, but that was an Instagram ad. It looks like it's kind of cheap and not the best, but I hemmed it myself. It had just a surged edge, so I baby roll hemmed it myself, and it's been in the mix for years and years and years now. So, it's the most sustainable thing you can do is wear what you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I am, obviously, since we have Jacob here, I needed to go all American. Every single article on my being is made in America. So shirt, suit, made by Bards, made by me. The fabric, this is American Woolen. So this came from Connecticut, and this was the most important suit to me that I own because it's a brown suit. And one of my favorite facts that I've brought up several times is that George Washington got his inauguration suit made in Hartford, Connecticut. So of course I needed to get a brown suit made here. It wasn't Hartford, but it's close enough. The shirt made in Jersey. The tie is Mountain and Sackett. I believe they are out of Colorado. So that's them. And then Rancourt is the shoes made in Maine. And then the underwear is Flint and Tinder. That's also made in America. So I really, I went all out.
You had to prove it.
Exactly. Prove that it can be done. You can buy all clothing made in America. So that's me. And it means a lot because I feel very tethered to the lineage of America, present day. And now it's so awesome that I get to sit here with a guy who weaved this fabric.
So I have a pair of trousers on, our fabric. It's a flannel that we make at American Woolen.
That's gorgeous.
The product was actually made at Hertling, which is, used to be in Brooklyn. It is now in Fall River, Massachusetts. The shirt, New England shirt, slim cut. The vest I actually purchased in Italy, but the idea was trying to see what we could do in America to make a vest of similar quality. And the vest means a lot to me for one important thing. It is made in a place local to where my family currently resides, and more importantly, its ability to really look at our clothing and take it down to a street level, which is the manufacturer does not need to be in some faraway locations, a small knitting mill outside of the town my family lives, and it really makes me realize in America, to bring this industry back, textiles, apparel, footwear, we don't need to focus on scale. We need to focus on something rather smaller. And the trainers, believe it or not, are New Balance, but they're New Balance out of England. So I don't know if you're familiar, New Balance makes trainers in 3 different, probably 400 different locations.
Yeah.
But 2 major locations is United Kingdom and actually Lawrence, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
These happen to come from United Kingdom.
Gorgeous.
So not as detailed as you are, but trying to do my best to make
I love it.
Made in
works.
America part of my life.
And the glasses.
The glasses actually I purchased in Europe. As I know, my family lives in Europe, and so it's much easier. My wife tends to pick my glasses for me. I'm not sure if that's good or bad.
She's got great taste.
Yeah, she does.
It's your glasses are an iconic look. You scroll through like Instagram, you've always got a just awesome pair
Thank
of
you for that.
glasses.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
So let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
So I was born in Chicago, Illinois. Born in Chicago, then was raised in Springfield, the capital of Illinois. And then went away to school for a few years in Europe, came back for university in New York, studied mathematics, economics, and then went over to Europe for my first job outside of university, working in investment banking, debt capital markets for a big French bank out of London, then Paris, and then a German bank out of London, then Frankfurt, then back to London. So kind of crisscrossing Europe for about 24 years. So I think most of my working career was spent in Europe.
That's wild. The back and forth.
Yeah.
How long were you in Chicago?
So I was raised in Chicago till about 5, and then I moved down to Springfield. My parents then moved back to Chicago when I was away at school, and then my parents just recently left Chicago. So I kind of look at Chicago as where I grew up, because my parents had lived there for 35 years after I left. And so every time I'd come back to America, I'd come back to visit my family in Chicago.
Yeah, no wonder you like dodgy neighborhoods. Chicago.
Exactly.
Yeah, my sister and her husband lived there for about 10 years. And I only ever went to visit them on the end of like the 10th year. They were just about to move, and I went, and it was awesome. I love Chicago. Now I go every 6 months for the trade show, but I love it. Chicago is probably one of my favorite cities. Like, I love
the sidewalks. They're
I'm going
so...
for the first time next year. I'm very
You've never been to
excited.
Chicago?
I've never been. I mean, I went for like a layover. I was there for
What? Yeah, that doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wild.
I'm excited.
Oh,
I'm gonna
it's
go for bridal
awesome.
market next year.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. Like, and where they have it at the Mart, it's unbelievable. Like, that's
Everybody
the
says
biggest
so.
building.
Says so.
Yeah, and then the river cuts right through it. So yeah, Chicago's gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Brothers, sisters?
Yeah, I have one brother. My brother currently lives and works in Switzerland. Wow. And he's been there for a while, and that's about it. I was actually going to make a point about Chicago. It's a great city to be in. I think the downside of Chicago is you need to get on an airplane to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I think now that I live in New England, having been in New England for the last 10 years, the beauty about New England really is you can live somewhere, get in your car, and you can either ski or surf and experience nature like I never saw in Illinois.
Yeah.
Again, not trying to put down Chicago, but I can definitely see Chicago as a city is amazing. It's rare that people don't talk about the state of Illinois. They talk about the city of Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I am one of the biggest Connecticut groupies ever. I love Connecticut so much. And to your point, it's because it could be in the beach in 45 minutes. I could be in the middle of nowhere in 45 minutes. One of, an inner city in 10 minutes from there. And then you could also go up to Vermont in 2 hours.
Correct.
New York, 2 hours. Boston, 2 hours. You got an international airport right there. Everything you want. You've got casinos. You've got the entire landscape of America is essentially in Connecticut. I love it. And it's probably close to what Europeans feel like, that they can take the train and travel through other countries. You can still go to other states.
I would say that in all my travels, and we just had a few people come in from Korea who just left yesterday. In all my travels, what I've really noticed is New England does shine. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's for the culture, it's for the apparel, the traditions, the prep schools, but you always will find people who are very fluent in knowing New England. It could be that New England is their port when they first arrive here, and they know, as you just indicated, within hours you can be in and around New England.
Yeah.
So you're right about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. Where you only lived in what, New York?
New York.
That's
Yep.
it?
I
Just
lived in Italy. I lived in Florence for almost a year.
Wait, what?
Yep. Stop. You didn't know that?
When was this?
My junior year in college.
No, I don't
FIT
think.
had a program at Polymota in Florence. And so I lived in Florence for 10, almost 11 months. It was
Nice.
wonderful.
It's a beautiful town.
It was
Beautiful town.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That was Jacob knows what that is. That's so cool.
Thank you.
Have you ever done anything with like FIT?
So currently I do teach a course at Parsons. And all
And
of
I
our
saw
work.
you just had students, I think. from
Exactly.
Parsons, right?
So there's an MFA textiles program that they started in 2018. And I was in that first introductory of trying to bring they were trying to bring professors in, or let's say part-time lecturers in, who could come from the industry. And as you probably know, from 1,200 wool mills in America, we're down to 4, and there are not that many wool mills left in New England.
Yeah.
And so they pulled me into it. And I got to say, it's been a real bright spot. I think the teaching really has made me do the deep dive into our industry and understand the business models, the value systems that made our industry what it was, what it is, and what it could be.
Yeah.
And I think that deep dive would not have happened if I did not have to study and memorize the lecture for the Parsons
Talk to the
students.
kids.
That's
How do
awesome.
you feel like, having done that, where do you gauge the temperature of like the young people?
So probably the thing that makes Parsons unique is its international reach. Thing that makes Parsons difficult to answer your question is the international reach. So I would say there will be, out of 15 to 20 students, it's going to be 3/4 foreign.
Okay.
One half Asian, a quarter European, and then a quarter American. So what I can say is definitely there's a lack of hands-on knowledge of how to make a garment. Far more conceptual thinking of our industry than trying to put it together. And that's probably the tough thing for me. I'm so used to bringing people in from the conceptual. Again, are you artists or are you designers? Are
It's
you
the
a
age
mix?
of creative director, or
Correct.
are you a designer, sewist?
And so I think the course has started out as trying to teach the business of textiles, and now it's become a course on entrepreneurship.
Wow.
And trying to say, look, you may be a designer or you may be an artist, but you'll need to work within an entrepreneurial atmosphere unless you go work for any big mills in America, of which there are none.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is trying to get them to have the hands-on approach to entrepreneurship. Start your own agency, start your own design shop, go out there in Brooklyn, rent some space, bring in some students. But again, I think the beautiful thing about the Parsons program has also to understand how much a textile comes into most every department at Parsons, right? You look at the interior design, you look at the architecture, you look at the fashion, you look at the textiles. What we do is pretty universal in trying to apply that to Parsons.
Yeah. Well, on that note, so you worked in finance for what? You said 20 years?
Yeah.
Where's the leap? Where did textiles, where did fashion, where did all of this come from?
While I left finance working in distressed leverage finance, so basically distressed debt, syndication origination for loans. So I did a lot of work on business models of distressed companies that had closed, bad balance sheet, good business, bad business, good balance sheet, and trying to distinguish the two. And I was working in Italy. I did an MBA in Italy in an Italian business school. And I think just of the convergence of factors, understanding the Italian economy, understanding European economy, really being enthusiastic about how Europeans' approach to craft manufacturing was so different from how we grew up in Illinois, which was scale manufacturing, industrial manufacture, not 15, 20, 30 operators, 300, 3,000 operators. So 2013, I was having a drink with an ex-colleague who worked at an Italian bank, and he mentioned that their client, Loro Piana, had a wool textile operation in Connecticut. And he said, "You're an American. You must have some contacts in America. Do you know anybody who wants to purchase this mill in America?" You know, if it was Loro Piana, most likely they had already taken the temperature on a Brooks Brothers, a Men's Warehouse. I was definitely the last call. I don't dismiss that. But I guess I can say that my enthusiasm and passion got the better of me. And 5 round trips, 50 hours of paid consultants, a few bottles of wine later, I called him back and I said, can I make a bid? And he said, anyone can make a bid. And so the mill had shut at the end of 2013. They made everybody redundant. And then we stepped in, purchased the assets of the mill in June, and started production in August of 2014. So I didn't have the knowledge of textiles, but I did know one thing. The mill was owned and operated by, in my mind, pretty much the gold standard for fine textile manufacturing. So the team that was in place that was made redundant, if we were to get the team back, you're probably talking the finest textile operators, technicians you're going to find in this country. So that knowledge base was pretty much intact. Wow. So I think the big thing was, what could we do and understand what approach we could take to making that mill operate. When you say what approach, a lot of it is, what market are you going after? What type of client are you going after? Who are you going to substitute? So that was the deep dive. But initially, the mill was there. The mill had been shut for about 8 months. But bringing the people back was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
My
And
mind
if you've
is
ever been...
completely blown.
Yeah.
Completely
Isn't
blown.
that wild?
Why?
Just that the story, like I'm just wow.
Yeah.
And also, but having, I mean, you and I grew up in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Knew none of this.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Knew nothing
So the
about
mill had been
this.
around, obviously the mill had been around, Matthew's been there. The mill's been around since 1841. It's actually a campus. I tell people, we didn't
huge.
purchase a mill, we purchased a textile campus. Yeah. And Loro Piana moved in 1988. And for the most part, it was designed in Italy, sold out of New York, made in Connecticut.
That also blows my mind because Loro Piana is like, to pitch to
The gold
us as like
standard.
fashion gals, right? It's the top.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah, I know.
I'm speechless.
So they owned and operated the mill for 25 years. And I think their approach to the mill was try to get away from paying the duties that at one time were very high in America. And for the most part, they were working with the usual suspects. They will be selling their fabrics to the Brooks Brothers, the Men's Warehouse, the Dillards, the Nordstroms, who basically were either sourcing textiles out of Asia or out of Europe. Having a local supplier enabled them to get the Italian look sold out of New York, made in America. Whether or not they really were able to advertise and commercialize that, I don't know. But again, those usual suspects were the main clients of the mill when we purchased a mill. Unfortunately, none of those clients stayed on. That's a whole another chapter. So I tell people that there are 2 chapters to American Woolen, one starting in 2014, ending with COVID, and then chapter 2 started when we reopened after COVID, and then today. And I tell everybody, like any good book, you need some of a rough, tough chapter to make the story richer, right?
Yeah,
Nobody wants to read everything that goes great.
Absolutely.
You need the blood, the
the
gut,
arc.
the arc. You need that, the negative, the doomsday scenario.
Yeah. Yep.
On the cliff, on the ledge, going to jump off. This is not going to work.
Yeah.
And then the swan song.
Absolutely.
And that's been my life.
Yeah, to that exact point, when I started my company, I had one sure client who was like, "I'll follow you wherever you go. It'll be fine." I was like, perfect. So on the strength of our relationship, I had placed an order for him, which he wanted, it was going to be like 15 suits or something made at Adrian Jewels. I mean, we're talking like $80,000 or something transaction. Product gets delivered and guy says, "I don't want this. I'm not paying." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, no. I don't want this. I don't want any more clothing. I don't want anything to do with you." I also did not take payment from him ahead of time, but just because of the strength of our relationship, it was kind of like a rolling debt. And I had no receipts. This was 8 days into starting Bard's. He just walked away. I had nothing. My brother is pretty much my business mentor. He is a very successful businessman. And so I'm at his house and I'm talking to him. I'm like, what do I do? It's June 2020. Nobody's buying clothing. This guy's built like John Cena. It's all custom. I'm now stuck with the entire wholesale debt, which was about $40,000. I was like, what do I do? And he was like, you just get out of it. And later that day, he was like, it's going to make a pretty good story. I was like, I mean,
Doesn't feel very good right now, but sure.
But
yeah,
like
good
hearing
story.
that this moment is a part of a bigger thing.
Correct. It's a journey.
It just,
No marathon, no sprint.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
that framework has helped me so much of just, it doesn't matter how bad that moment is. It's a part of something bigger. And you don't know what it is, like where it is in that journey. You just, all right, I just need to see this through because this journey is happening whether I like it or not.
You had the assumption on how the chapters were written, and then life ripped those chapters out.
Correct.
So you had new blank pages to pivot into.
I like that. Yeah. So you need those dark times. But so when you come here to get some, you buy the mill, now you're like, I need to get clients, I need to get distribution, where do you even begin? Do you just sit down with a phone book?
I think that's basically the whole story. The idea was trying to understand what the mill represents. And I think that was a deep dive that I'd never done, maybe initially. There was 8 months to do work, maybe even 6 months. And so maybe we weren't as prepared, but I guess that's what life is about, right? It's really, we talk this thing in English, working on the fly or trying to pivot and find it. But actually, it's what I teach the kids at entrepreneurship, that nothing in life can prepare you for this, which is what you just experienced with a client. Everything, your playbook. So I think that our biggest problem was trying to maintain the relationships that were built with that mill through 1990s, 2000s. And I was mystified that not a single client
I'm mystified by that. Not one came back.
Yeah.
to the mill. It was tough that everybody we contacted indicated interest. Nobody followed through.
Yeah.
Every single client. And I don't want to go through it because it could be difficult for everybody, but nobody really followed through. I think we were fortunate that we were able just to buy more time, buy more time, continue to put more money into it. And I think a lot of people wondered why we didn't throw in the towel. And I'll say it. This mill is one of the last, New England's last wool textile operation. If the mill was to shut, the mill would never reopen again, ever. The mill has its own water rights. Those water rights came from a May 15th, 1877 purchase.
Wow.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
The mill's operators are schooled in a certain technique. There are no more vocational schools in textiles. There are no more wool mills in America like there were. That mill needed to stay open at whatever cost. And I think it just became this struggle to keep the mill going and develop the client base on the fly, develop an aesthetic that could work with the client base. And that's basically it. We are selling, more than selling a product, we're selling a story. And I know I can say it over and over, but it's true.
Shocking.
The world doesn't need more product. The world needs better storytelling. In this age of the commoditization of anything and everything we do and anything and everything we consume, the world needs better storytelling. The New England story is a damn powerful narrative. And I didn't realize that at the time. I was just trying to bang out more Navy suit fabric. And I think it made me realize at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is understand our client base. And then it extended further. I think the big thing was really understanding a value system.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw around some big business terminology, but the value system is pretty simple. Where does it start? Where does it end? Where are you? Where does it start? Montana, Colorado, the ranchers, the people, the families, the traditions that made Wyoming a ranching state. The fiber comes to me. I turn it into a New England cloth. The fabric then travels to a New England and or Northeastern manufacturer to turn that into a more powerful story. So I think what I've realized is the ability to take just a simple rancher's flock in Wyoming and turn that commodity into a specialty. And effectively, that's what the Europeans taught me. How do the Europeans turn every commoditized product into a specialty? And how America spent pretty much the 20th century turning every specialty from the 19th century into a commodity. And that whole
Totally reversed.
Exactly. And that ability to turn our consumer products into traditions that we consume on a daily basis. Because traditions are what brings communities together.
Yeah.
We're so fatigued. We're
Yeah.
so fatigued as a society
Correct.
with this commoditization of literally everything.
You know, it's so
Everything.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
I was just having this discussion the other day. You brought up so many good points. The first that I think is very important, and especially for the audience that we've cultivated for this podcast, is that you can start without having all the answers, and you can keep going when you have imposter syndrome, and you just power through. These are just very fundamental, basic things. People just need to go with it. You're never going to have all the answers. You just gotta get through it. That's one point I think is just very important. The second point, Walter Isaacson wrote that very famous Steve Jobs book, and I've recently just read it for the first time.
Really?
Yeah, just read it for the first time. It is great. And it is so depressing to hear how optimistic Steve Jobs was during that book, and then to see what Apple is now.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Beat
God,
the optimism right out of you.
God damn. Because he's just like, we need to be focused on that, the story, what we're doing for people, how we're like innovating, how we're connecting everybody, how we're connecting people. And now it's just like every 6 months, a new iPhone comes out and a new thing and a new charger, and the screen sucks. So you got to get it replaced.
Make things worse so that you have to upgrade. Like how they talked about, like how Maytag, right, went out of business because they made their washing machine so well that nobody bought new washing machines.
Yeah.
Okay, pivot.
Yeah.
Like now have servicemen that only do,
Right.
you know what I mean? We've just lost that. It's nice that we can have these conversations and we start to see that glimmer of hope, that glimmer of things turning a little bit for the better.
Yeah.
But it's just wild to me, and it's hard not to feel a little gloom and doom about it sometimes because it's very overwhelming to feel like everything has been commoditized. Everything, it's hard.
You know, so I get that dark cloud that hangs over it. But what I see with my company, it's that glimmer of hope that I get people under 40 all the time buying these garments, $3,000-$4,000 garments, but they're buying the story. They're not coming to me because they get to pick the fun buttons.
Matthew, they're buying you.
Yes,
right.
They're
buying you. The story is you, but the story is you.
Yeah.
You are the fingerprint that makes that garment unique.
I appreciate that. But that's the thing, is that I'm the conduit for a bigger story behind me. The story of this cloth, the story of the manufacturers. I don't want to sell you a fun lining and a fun button and the buttonhole's going to be a different color. Let's talk about why a brown fabric made in Hartford, Connecticut means something. Let's talk about an entrepreneur that came from Europe who bought a mill. Let's talk about a third generation manufacturer in Rochester that is going to make the garment. Let's talk about somebody who was born in Honduras who's here in front of you selling you this entire lineage of American manufacturing. That's what they're buying, not the button, not the lining.
When it goes back to it, I think when anyone says, how do you think, let's just say many Italian friends during this whole process back before the mill was purchased informed me, you're Americans. You don't design luxury, you consume it. We design luxury. But I always told people, the craft beer guys taught us how to do it. And that story I tell to everybody. The craft beer guys understood not only how to take materials and how to take branding and how to take local and take it to a higher level, but how do you create a more distributed manufacturing footprint where rather than having 5 big breweries, you got 500 small breweries catering to a local and turning
Very
that,
good point. I
and turn
never
that
thought about
whole-
it that way.
Well, the beer is an experience.
Very smart.
And we grew up not even knowing how beer was made unless you really were aficionado. Now you go to a craft brewery and you can actually see it made in front of you. But think about how we grew up and when they started opening the kitchens. You remember how the restaurants in the 1990s started putting windows up? And when we grew up, the cook was behind.
Right.
The world changed when cooks became chefs.
Yeah.
But then take that to the beer industry, and now you have brewmasters. We'll take that to our industry. And I think that's what we're trying to do at American Woolen. How can we take an industry that was always portrayed as low value added industry that's commoditized? And you look at Europe and you realize, well, it's not.
Right.
Nobody can say that Tuscan manufacturers of leather goods or footwear or textiles apparel low value added because they're selling a $2,500 sport coat in New York City and a $3,000 bag. And the bag has a resale value that could be even double. So I think what we realized, the Europeans were definitely on to taking an industry that we portrayed as low value added and going back to that Michael Porter comment, there's no such thing as low value added and high value added industry. It's a low value added or high value added business within an industry. And again, that's the commoditization and the special, how do you create a specialty from a commodity?
Yeah.
I think there's hope. I think that it's definitely taken the collective consciousness to become aware of things.
Correct.
So the more we talk about it, the more we do things like this, the more we rally around that conversation. And to your point, community and community building, we get that word out. It starts to spread like wildfire. I feel like we're right at that beginning phase with the fatigue, with everything just kind of piled on. And now we're like, we want something different. We want something better. We want stuff to last. We're kind of getting that nostalgia a little bit. And I think it's a good thing for quality and for story and for community. And I think it's going to be pretty cool to see where this goes.
And the traditions.
And the
Again,
traditions.
these traditions
They're
brought
important.
community together. And I always say, go back to the craft beer. Those craft beer guys, they bring everyone together on a Friday night.
Yeah.
And people walk in, they understand the beer, they understand the local color of that beer. They understand the local, everything goes in. And those beer guys understood it. But food and beverage. And so I guess our idea is, as food and beverage, the leading indicator for all consumer goods, are textiles, apparel, and footwear poised to follow that path?
Yeah. I equate what I do a lot when I'm talking to clients when they're at the showroom. I say what I do is very much like an open kitchen chef. I'm going to tell you where the ingredients come from. Just like the chef that morning went to the market to buy the ingredients. And I'm like, maybe these vegetables came from Sub-Edge Farm in Farmington. Maybe my ingredients came from Stafford Springs, and they're like, this is mine. It's something that they've never even thought of because to them, clothing was just pure function. I just need pants so I don't get arrested. Like, but now I'm like, it can be so much more. It can be an experience like a date night. That feeling you have on a date night where you're like, this is a memory. That you can have with clothing when you get invested in the fibers, in the story behind who's milling it.
I think there's also a little bit of that like level of when things are too big or so big in a lot of cases, something gets nefarious along the lines, whether it's the labor, whether it's how the products are being made or harvested or whatever. And I think then you start seeing, you know, those consumer reports and things come out and you're like, oh no, I can't buy from Nike because they're using child labor overseas. When you have a very a short, small stream of manufacturers, producers, vendors that you're getting your products from, you know where they're coming from.
Right.
There's less chance of anything, we'll call it negative, happening along the way because you are actually face to face with the people who are doing it.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that and for how impactful that is on the line.
Yeah.
Along the line.
Yeah. You know, you brought up that good point about, you know, it almost feels so overwhelming and depressingly overwhelming. Like if I do 10 right things, there's going to be 50 wrong things that are bigger with that picture. A perfect example is this whole like bringing reusable bags, you know, to the grocery store. And it's like, okay, but if I bring reusable bags and then they tax me if I buy the bag at the store, but then who's collecting the tax revenue? So now they need more people to do that. So the state needs to pay more people. So now I'm actually costing the state more for doing this so-called good, or like plastic versus paper straws and all this. But all of that seems so wild. But when you get down to this, it's very clear. You get the fabric in America, you get it made in America. It's unbelievable, the comparison of your carbon footprint. You had that great point, which I want you to bring up, the miles traveled of like a Ralph Lauren.
Yeah, we did a whole analysis on this too. I'm not going to mention the brand, J. Crew. But they had a blazer that actually we did the math, just knowing where the mill purchases the fiber, and the fiber started in Australia, was then trucked to a port, and then on a boat over to Italy, scoured, made into a fabric, went over to China, made into a garment, back on a boat, into Long Beach. And I think we did the full mileage, and it was outstanding how many miles a $495 blazer has traveled. And you think to yourself, really? In this day and age? Yes, in this day and age. And again, so much has happened politically over the last week we can go into. I don't know if globalization is in reverse, but I would say at least if we want to build traditions, local manufacturing of consumer products will do a hell of a lot to bring us closer together.
Yeah.
And we can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can have globalization to a degree. We don't have to base our entire economic strategy on it or on the reverse.
Right.
We can mix things up. We can have diversity. It's a good thing.
To the point of the Instagram ad, just stop making it your default. Why is I just need something, even if it's like chapstick, Amazon buy, I don't care how many boxes it comes in. I don't care how many planes need to get it here. I need that stick of chapstick.
Do you understand how much the American consumer is consuming? You don't even need to go deep to understand. Consumption makes us so damn happy.
Yeah.
And production makes us so damn sad. We talked about this. The vice.
Why? How do you change that? Why?
The virtue of production over the vice of consumption. The virtue of production over the vice of consumption is something that has made this country what it is.
We need more therapy. Okay.
50 years. No, but I think
therapy for that voice.
to go back to your comment about this idea, we just understood how much these blazers are traveling. But I think it's a deeper argument. It kind of goes back to what Matthew said, which is, does this product represent a tradition that you can really, or it's just a blazer? You need a blazer, go buy a blazer. Yeah. But as you, of course, are trying to do with your current businesses, you try to bring that story more local. And again, there's a market for everything. We know that. I think what we've looked at American Woolen is, how can we position New England to be a purveyor of premium textiles, apparel, and footwear? Because we've seen that Italy has embraced this, and certain Italian regions, Tuscany, for example, I tell everybody, the Tuscan fashion system is a 8 billion euro system that employs 108,000 people. If you just do basic division, it makes you realize that's high value added. And it shows to you what we could do in New England, just trying to understand how these systems existed in Europe. Because you got to remember, just as we're talking about the commoditization of everything in America, that happened in the 20th century. Because in the 19th century, as he indicated with George Washington's story, it was a specialty. the commoditization. So let's just maybe hope that the 20th century was the aberration.
Yeah.
That in effect, we're looking for specialties.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, it's been 1,000 years of specialties. We got 100 years of commodity.
Right.
Okay, that's 10%.
We're okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah. It's proof that like you can build a lifestyle around that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that community.
I had a really interesting question that's been kind of knocking around in my head since you were talking about when you took over the factory and getting the people back and how specialized these folks are who are helping to run the mill. Where's the future of that? How are new people coming in to that part of the system?
I will kind of default to Starbucks. And I'll just say, when we all grew up, you had not that much coffee. The selection was pretty limited. And Starbucks created a mass of baristas. And the craft beer guys created a flock of brewmasters. I think what we're trying to do at American Woolen, knowing that there are no more vocational schools for textiles, it is on-the-job training. I'm pleased to say that recently we've been able to attract a newer demographic, younger than there were before, and people more interested to work with their hands.
Keep talking.
And will I wonder if
Yes.
just after years and years of the American economy thinking that manufacturing was dirty, we've kind of turned. And I'm finding more and more people who said, you know, I don't want to go to university and I want to learn a craft. And this could be a fun craft. And I'm fun. This could be an interesting craft. And so I think we've been pleased just in the last 4 months in our hiring that we've been able to attract a younger demographic into the mill. Now, we are in Stafford
How do you and I
Springs.
start a school? How do you and I do this?
I think we've talked about our schools the best way to do it. I think probably yes, the ability to bring some sort of schooling in. But I think a lot of it goes back to the price of the product. Because at a lot of times people are so attuned to this being a low value added industry. We need to, I don't want to say push prices higher, but really talk about the luxuriousness of what we're trying to manufacture. We're not doing commodities, but
value.
specialties. It's value.
It's so it goes back to that viral Mike Rowe sound where he says these crafts, being a crafter, doesn't matter if it was like home ec or cooking, that used to be taught in schools.
Correct.
And then we just got rid of it.
Correct.
And then that happened globally. We just arbitraged these industries. We just said, go over there. I don't want to see it. So now we have no concept of what work is. So people don't have an understanding of what good is. They think $50 for a hoodie is a lot of money. There's no North Star. There's nothing telling them what work actually is, what labor actually is, what it takes to go into it.
What
There's no
production
concept-
actually is.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's production.
all of it. What does a shipping container going across the world actually look like? We freaked out for that 1 week when the one was stuck in the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
But like
How about when the one collapsed a bridge?
there are like 1 million of those every hour on our planet.
There's a really beautiful article. I don't know if you know Harvard Business Review. I think it's just celebrated their 100th year. And there's a beautiful article they did talking about what was important in the first 20 years of Harvard Business Review as opposed to now.
Wow.
Production came number one
Really?
between 1922 and like 1940.
Yeah.
And then production dropped to 6 out of 6.
Yeah.
Because production is not really what American business is about. We're about marketing and selling and design. And I think that goes back to it. This is a whole other topic, but might as well go into it now. Another thing I learned in Europe was the 4 legs to a luxury product. 4 legs: material, manufacturing, design, and branding. And I would argue the Europeans have really emphasized the material integrity and the manufacturing quality over the design and branding. And as we all know in America, we've spent all of our energies. Material quality is not that important, and manufacturing excellence, not that important, but branding and design. And we all know, thanks to Instagram,
Pretty packaging.
branding and design are knocked off every second of the day. So I think what we've learned from the Europeans and at American Woolen, how do we put that material integrity back? And what does that mean? The best Wyoming fiber into your fabric. The best Montana fiber in, that's our material. What do we do with manufacturing? Matthew said it. We do everything talking about how we do it, how much energy we put into it, really highlight that in our story. And those two legs, in my mind, are what separates luxury from non-luxury, right?
Yeah.
The material quality, because if it starts at a high price point, it's going to be sold at a higher price point. And if it starts low and the fluff is the branding and the marketing, you know what you're getting.
It's so funny because as you say that to me, I'm like, the quality is the marketing in and of itself.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's the advertisement right there. It writes itself.
Correct.
That's what I want.
But people, what's interesting is that when people sit down with me about quality, they also don't trust quality.
Oh.
That's a huge aspect.
Absolutely.
They don't know
What do you mean by that?
They don't know what quality is. This company says they have the best product. This company says they have the best product. This company
Well,
says
I think there's also that association where you assume if you're paying more for something, it's better.
Yes.
And that's not true anymore.
No, yep.
That may have never been true, but that's especially not true when we look at like luxury brands today. All that extra fluff, all that extra marketing, all that extra nonsense around whatever the item is, but the quality has gone severely down.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily buy a lot of luxury products today brand new, but I would buy their vintage.
Yeah.
I would look at their leathers from
Well, you know
back
what?
when.
You opened a good point. I think something before I moved to Hartford, I lived in Brookline, Massachusetts, and there is a store called Buffalo Exchange, which was wedged. We were living wedged between BC, Boston College, and Boston University. So when I grew up, Chicago, Springfield, vintage stores, there was a Goodwill. There were some vintage stores in big city, but nobody really shopped vintage.
Yeah.
I mean, alternative people do. You go into this Buffalo Exchange off Harvard in Brookline, and it's chock-a-block, full of people. And you try to sell fast fashion, they will say,
They'll laugh you out of the store.
get out of my store.
Yep.
If you have a Pendleton jacket from 1979, they're on their hands and knees saying, please, please work with us. So I'm almost wondering, to your point, if the secondary market is giving that underlying bid to quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something we never experienced before. And I almost wonder, to your point about how people are changing, you said you have younger clients out there, they are understanding the true value of luxury.
It's coming.
And so you must wonder.
There's a reckoning coming.
There's a
There
reckoning
is.
coming.
And I think
that
it's because of millennials having more and more of the buying power in the market.
Good.
It's, I don't need everything. I don't need buy one, get four free. I just want one good suit that works.
Yes.
I don't need X, Y, and Z. I just want one thing. I don't need 1,000 channels. Just give me Netflix. It's this, I just want to kind of
Simplify.
simplify and understand the value that I'm getting. And I think what we have with our relationship is the transparency. I can show people, there's American Woolen. There's where the fabric is made. There's my factory in Rochester. There's where your garments are being made. There's no chains. There's no kids. There's no depressing air conditioner that doesn't work. They're getting paid livable wages.
They're right there in your
They're
community.
right there in your community. Back to your earlier point about building a community. These are your neighbors making clothing for you, and they are paid a livable wage. They can raise their kids the same way you want a job where you can raise your kids. Why would you get a job would you ever get a job that wouldn't pay you something? No. So why would the person doing this labor get something?
Well, that's, again, something going back to my past. Another thing about living in Italy that I really enjoyed was the chance for producers and consumers to dine at the same table.
Yeah.
And you will find yourself at a dinner party in New York City. There's not a single producer you'll never find a producer. And I remember you're living in Italy and even living in France and just seeing producers and consumers dining at the same table, morning, noon, and night. Yeah. And it's such a refreshing thing to realize that there are people, and I think it's the American economy, which just that thinks that production is inferior quality, is an inferior quality of work, as opposed to something. And I always say, I think, to your point about, are you getting younger people? Yes.
So
I'm
glad.
optimistic that after years and years of berating manufacturing as
low level,
less
than.
it's changing. And I think a lot of people are wondering if there are alternative job routes as opposed to four-year college degree at a liberal arts
Thank
university.
God, too.
I was just
falling
about to
into
make
something.
that
That is
segue.
too much money.
Right.
I pray my daughters want to learn a craft, and it's one that I can teach them.
I think most of my siblings said if their kids don't want to go to college, they will not bat an eyelash.
Same.
You know, it's just like.
But that was not the norm before.
No.
It was you needed
and how
that
quick
degree,
it was.
that piece of paper to
This
add value
was
to
a
yourself.
whole political strategy in
Absolutely.
America to really understand how higher education could lead to this, that, and the other. And again, I don't. Europe has a lot of struggles economically, politically. We all do. So I'm not saying that Europe is paradise and America is not. America should be paradise. But I'm hoping that what's going to happen in the 21st century, because you got to think about it, although we are talked about the 21st century, we're only in the first quarter of it right now. So there's another 3 quarters to go. How can we really elevate these crafts to a viable occupation?
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, you got to go back to America 100 years ago. There were bakeries, there were people making, there were candlestick makers, there were butchers. You're seeing some of these green shoots happening in larger cities, right? Bakeries are opening in New York again, and they're doing well.
Yeah.
Bakeries are opening in Boston, they're doing well. And we just do the math.
Right.
If we could open a bakery in every small town in America, we would create 250,000 jobs in an occupation that could pay well.
Yep.
And I'm just hoping that maybe the 21st century is going to be more kind to these crafts because you're seeing that people want to learn. And I live in Hartford. Somebody opened up a pasta stop, a fresh pasta store in West Hartford, and people go.
Yeah. To that exact point, I have this conversation all the time about community and competition. There are essentially 2 garment manufacturers left. There's about 3, we'll call them luxury garment manufacturers, suits, sport coats, stuff like that, left in America, about 3. And I tell people all the time, I don't want to sell a suit that starts at $3,400. I would love to sell ones that are cheaper. But since there's no demand for it, all of those manufacturers have been closing over the last several decades. And now this is what we're left with. More people buy, more demand, more supply, more how do we get this product out at a better price? It fosters innovation. People will think, how do I make a suit in America for a better price? So that change will actually spark a better consumer product, more affordable consumer product. So you brought up these other 3 mills. I did want to learn because I'm fascinated. Who are the three other mills other than you?
So the American Woolen is a worsted woolen mill in Connecticut. Yep. There's a worsted mill called Burlington down in North Carolina. There's another smaller woolen mill called Faribault in Minnesota. And then, of course, the famous Pendleton out in Oregon. Yeah. And those are the 3 mills.
That's wild. Yeah, because I talk about I work with 2 of the 3 garment manufacturers in the country. And it's wild that we all know each other by name, by phone number, in the entire country of America. But
Matthew, you got to think, upstream, we have 5 million sheep that generate 22 million pounds of fiber. 70% of fiber is shipped to China.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Downstream, to his point, we import $5 billion of wool, textiles, and apparel and accessories every year. So there's an upstream supply.
Yeah. We could just make it ourselves.
There's a downstream demand. But, the issue is the lack of that viable midstream link to connect the upstream to the downstream.
Right.
And talk about telling the story. We're telling the story, but trying to get that story to kind of replicate and tell the story across. But to your point, do people still wear wool garments? Yes. Are they wearing American wool garments? No. Or less of American wool garments. And let's be honest. We know one thing. The Europeans who are coming to America to sell their product, it's great. The Europeans are selling a luxury product to a luxury consumer. It's how do we turn the dial and sell an American luxury product, maybe not to an American consumer, to an Asian consumer, or to a European consumer. Just as we love European luxury, the Europeans love American luxury.
We love some Levi's overseas, okay?
Yeah, but the problem is
sneakers.
They can't get it.
Yeah.
All they will say to us, designed in New York, made in China. So it's Chinese. It's designed in New York, made in, made.
Yeah.
So how come where it's made has to have an inferior value to where it's designed?
Yep.
That's the American ideal, right?
Yeah.
Where it's designed does not need to be where it's made. And we're hearing about this with the fashion. They're talking about the garment district in New York City and how do they keep the garment district viable. And a lot of people are saying smaller brands can't meet the minimums.
Yes.
of Asian or European suppliers. So they want to keep it domestic.
Yeah. No, shit, I was going to say, oh yeah, Japan. They love made in America garments. Actually, our factory we're trying to work on making a line that goes right to Japan because they're so hungry for that.
Well, you know what? They'll be hungry if it's American fabric. Because
Yeah.
I just had Japanese. We had our Japanese contingent came through the mill 2 weeks ago, and our Korean agents just left the mill yesterday.
Yeah.
And they're telling me the exact same thing you're saying.
Yeah.
But what they're looking for is 100% made in America.
Yeah.
The textile needs to represent who we are.
Yeah.
Not just the make.
Yeah. The number one thing I talk about is what wool is. Because when people think of wool, they think of those thick socks their grandma gave them.
Think of
for
itchy.
Christmas. Yep. That just heavy, itchy
stifling,
sweater for
scratchy,
Christmas.
yada, yada.
That's what they think wool is. That's the biggest turnoff from the beginning. And I'm like, no. Just sit down. Let's have a chat. And I go through and I show them I think you would consider it a hopsack, one of your fabrics. I have it, and it was made in Brooklyn. And I'm like, look, it's see-through. It's literally almost mesh, how light it is. Wool can be any weight. It's a matter of how it's milled. And then that's when I start to talk about how it's milled, the different ways and all the different processes. And people are like, oh my, this is crazy.
The different functions it serves
But
at
it's
different
that.
weights.
It's that heaviness that is the turnoff. It's not the American part. They just think, well, American wool, no, I don't want to sweat. I'm like, you won't. It's very
Actually, the
light.
opposite.
Yeah, it's actually, you know where one of the biggest buyers of wool on the planet is in the Middle East, is because it's so light and breathable that when they're dressed head to toe in these garbs, they're like, oh yes, thankfully I'm in wool. It's not polyester.
Oh God,
it's
it's
not
gonna be
that.
that's
polyester.
exactly
You'll
that,
melt.
to the point you were making before about, well, that the high value, low value added. The Europeans and the Asians are using the technologies to make that fabric what it is.
Yep.
And that's where the Americans started reducing the investment in the equipment, which has always been the American phenomenon, and putting more money in marketing and sales and reducing the production. And you go to some of these European mills, the Italian textile mills, it is so modern. It is so clean. It really shows the Europeans lift production to a cult status. And it's something that the Asians are doing
And they innovated
successfully.
along the way.
And innovated.
They grew.
They do it. They take production
They
more
evolve.
seriously than the Americans, who just look at production as one of the value equations made up of many components, production being the cheapest.
Yeah.
I think the Europeans look at it being higher. And as to your point about the textiles coming out of Europe are phenomenal. You can wear them next to skin, regardless.
Yeah. Well, actually, at my manufacturer, sometimes these European textiles are so light, they're impossible to make.
So, Matthew, that is the whole point.
Yeah.
The climate has always been a distinction factor of your textile.
Yeah.
We all know in March, when the flowers are blooming in Italy, we still have snow on the ground.
Yeah.
We know only in New England we'll get minus 30 degrees. You don't get minus 30 degrees in Italy. And that's the point I was trying to make before. Textile should represent more than just a color palette. At the New England mill, our fabric represents the flora, the fauna of New England. And I was just thinking this morning in Hartford, the November sun in Connecticut is so different from the sun in June. The way the sun shines across the hills in Connecticut, well, that is raw material for our design aesthetic. Just as the Italians do it so successfully with Portofino, Capri, Ischia, and the Mediterranean. And why don't we take the raw material we have, which is so vast, and not design a textile with the weight? We have a New England winter. We don't have European winters. We have a New England winter.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate that with the weight. And those little touch points are what makes our textiles unique. And yet there are no mills that do that. I think that's the point.
Yeah. Where do you see all of this going in the future? What are your aspirations? What are you actively working towards? And then what are you hopeful for?
So American Woolen, if you go to our website, you see this idea of an ecosystem. A lot of people kind of wonder what the ecosystem is. And in effect, the ecosystem is what I studied as a business school student in Milan and what I saw in Tuscany, which was basically the ability to put textile manufacturing together with garment manufacturing, with footwear manufacturing, in creating a cluster. These industrial clusters are what most everybody has highlighted as the quickest way to decarbonize an economy. Put it together. Just we were talking about the sport coat coming from overseas. Put it together, you can decarbonize. And our goal is to see if we can turn Connecticut, believe it or not, into a luxury manufacturing paradise.
Yes.
Living in the city of Hartford, as you probably know, Hartford has been known as the the capital of insurance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very few people want to come to visit the capital of insurance.
That's not sexy.
Very
That's
few
crazy.
people, very few people want to embrace insurance all through their life. I think what we've realized at Hartford is, can we transition Hartford to a maker's paradise?
Yeah.
Can we, as the mill, providing...
I'm so here for this.
Well, the idea, as the mill is the nucleus of this ecosystem, why? As a material provider, we just are coming out with a cotton flannel. So, of course, we're a wool mill, but we can mill cotton. But what's different from our cotton flannel? You want a European cotton flannel, it's going to come out around 9 ounces, pretty inexpensive. You want a New England cotton flannel, it's 20 ounces.
Nice.
So we
20 ounces?
Wow.
We put the meat back into the fabric to represent the November, the October. But this is what the craft beer guys have been doing successfully. We're just taking well, you know what? It's what the textile mills have been doing up until the 20th century.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
The mills in New
bringing it
England,
back.
bringing it back.
Yep.
So in effect, we talked about the function, every product needs technical or functional innovation. No, it needs cultural or something that represents the cultural innovation of a product is as rich as the functional innovation of a product. That's what we're doing. But the goal would be to create this ecosystem based in Connecticut that could be able to provide a global luxury consumer with made in New England. And the ability to bring it closer to our mill is just for this decarbonization exercise to kind of bring it closer. And to be fair, similar to what Matthew said earlier about these larger suit manufacturers in America, we are looking for a constellation of manufacturers to support our mill. The bigger the enterprise, the less flexible and nimble it is. And when you see a large cut and sew facility close with 400 sewing operators, why didn't we have 10 facilities with 40 operators or 40 facilities with 10 operators?
Yeah.
Because in effect, it's what Italy is doing so successfully. You see these small manufacturers in and around Florence, but you don't need it in a large footprint.
Right.
Smaller footprints, more nimble, specialize in a certain garment.
Right.
Some are better at a sport coat, some are better at trousers, some are better in shirting, some are better in outerwear.
Yeah.
In effect, what we're trying to bring is what America had in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century, is kind of do it that way. So the goal at American Woolen is to kind of seed this ecosystem. And I'm going to say Connecticut just because that's where we are. And I think Connecticut is unique because, number one, we're between Boston and New York. Number two, we're close to a major logistic hub just with 84, 95, 91. Product comes in and out. Number three, in my mind, Hartford had a absolutely perfect demographic to do it. People in a large immigrant population, they maybe lacked secondary, tertiary education, and they would embrace manufacturing, light manufacturing, as a potential occupation.
I love it. I'm so here for this.
Right?
It's amazing. I'm like,
I know.
I feel so inspired.
I knew. I was like, oh, Melissa's going to like die.
For the listener, we've never met before. So
Yeah.
this has been a dream come true for me.
But
I
the
am
future,
fangirling completely.
The future is that. The future is really trying to bring back this industry. And I think it's going to have to be brought back in a more concentrated format.
Yeah.
And again, the idea at American Woolen could then become the laboratory for other regions to look at what we're doing.
And copy.
And then, let's be honest, we can maybe, let's create a region maybe in Colorado or up in, just as Pendleton does out west, every American region is different.
Yeah.
Well, we should be able to create this little sector, this little cluster here, and then maybe as a laboratory for other clusters to take root.
Retrofit it to the next area.
Like the craft beer guys.
Yep.
The guys started in California. Now you have Vermont. You have New Hampshire. Every state,
Smart.
every city has a craft brewery.
When I was in Honduras over the summer, we did this like day tour, and this van basically brought me and my siblings around, and we went to these places. And he was like, he was talking to my brother in Spanish because none of the rest of us speak Spanish. And he was like, oh yeah, and for lunch we're going to go to the brewery. And we're like, oh, I did not expect a brewery in Honduras. And so we're thinking, I was like, well, wonder what it's going to look like a brewery. And then we pull up and it's literally called The Brewery. And we go in and it is your typical like San Francisco white guy who came to Honduras to start this business. Yep. Yeah. And it looks, I kid you not, it looks like it could have been in like West Hartford or something. It's got the big vats and it's got the tubes and it's got the open, and it's just some guy with a backwards hat with the Salt Life shirt and the board shorts. And he's like, yeah, man, you know, me and my guys, we just invested and we came down here. And it's like, damn. But yeah, to your point, you've got that model. You can transpose it onto different industries. We've talked about this a lot in Rachel Slade's book, Making It in America. We went and saw her talk in Guilford, and she has this whole concept about the clothing industry needs to go through what the food industry did. And that's your point. The beer industry, the restaurants.
Just come here today. Yeah. I saw the Connecticut Wine Road.
Yeah, the
Who
wine
would
trail.
have thought that Connecticut has a wine trail? No idea.
Yeah.
But it opens us up to understanding what Connecticut is. Yeah. And we're consuming Connecticut.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess that's it. Yeah. You know?
To your point earlier, too, about community and competition, look how many breweries there are, microbreweries. Theoretically, you're all in competition with each other. They're all doing just fine.
Yeah.
Everybody makes a good living. Quality product.
Right.
You're attracting your local customer. What bad has come from this?
Right.
Where is there like that visceral, competition? It's amazing. It's a really great microcosm.
The equation has changed. They have switched the equation from a focus on volume to a focus on value. Because whenever we talk about productivity, the business schools talk about productivity, what comes up number one is volume.
Yeah.
More output for lower input.
Yep.
And we're thinking, okay, more output, but is that quantified in value or volume?
Right.
Right.
And that's how the Europeans shifted it.
Right. Because if you watch like Bar Rescue, John Taffer's always talking about how every bar seat's like $10,000. Every single square foot is quantified and calculated. But at a brewery, they're like, just put some lawn chairs outside. And that's where their value is starring. I, who don't drink, still go to breweries every couple of weeks with my friends. Yeah. We go and the kids come and the dogs come. And their value skyrockets.
Well, that's the whole idea of community, right? And I always think about it. And even this is where the Americans, how do you say in English? How the Americans excelled even from the Europeans. The wine tasting in Tuscany came because of California. Nobody can think that the Italians said, no, the Italians were closed on the weekend. The Italians were not open. It was California vintners who said, we're going to have a wine tasting. And the wine tasting, and now the Chianti Wine Road is open Monday through Sunday, and it's done it. Well, the same thing about the craft breweries. To his comment, there's a few breweries outside of Boston, and you see on Friday afternoons, chock-a-block.
Yeah.
That's community.
Yeah.
Bringing people together. Because towns used to bring people together. Well, I guess it's kind of depressing that a brewery has to bring people together because it kind of shows where we are in our life cycle. But in effect, they did it, right?
Yeah. But sorry to cut you off, but to this point about the CT Wine Trail, they just announced the CT Movie Trail.
Yes, I saw that.
They just announced this Christmas movie. Yep, the CT Christmas Movie Trail, because so many Hallmark movies are filmed in Connecticut. I think like the majority of them are. So Ned Lamont was like, well, let's have a movie. And in his speech, he said, we have a brewery trail, we have a wine trail, why not something non-alcoholic? So he did a Connecticut Christmas movie trail, and it goes through and he's got the map.
Non-alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot about Connecticut.
Exactly. But that's the thing, is that there is such a yearning for community that you can pitch this idea and people are like, yes, rally around it. And I think that this idea of an incubator, a laboratory, a ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, people will want to get involved, because you've got the fashion industry is so brilliant because you've got so many people from different facets. They can come because they're interested in textiles. They can come because they're interested in sewing. They can come because they're interested in designing a line.
Yeah, but interesting you made a point, because when you talk about fashion in America, we talk about one thing, design.
Yeah.
And before you said design, you said production. So you get it.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yep.
When they're talking about the garment district in New York City and the erosion of the garment district, they're talking about we need to bring more designers and investors and designers, investors, and academics into the room. No, you need to bring producers into the room, because producers are what make fashion an industry. And I think it goes back to how the Italians, our approach to fashion is you can learn it. The European approach to fashion is go and get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
Just jump in.
Yeah.
That's something that I talk about in my story all the time for how I got to doing bridal alterations. There's no major for bridal alterations. There's no major for alterations at all. But I went to FIT. I was in the design program. And the whole time I was there, I was like, ugh, I loved the sewing. I loved the draping. And I loved the design part. But I never quite felt I had the creative edge. And that's okay. That's just who I am. And that's just the way my mind works. But I didn't know what was going to be out there for me. So I did different jobs in design and in visual merchandising and all these different things, and kind of put my sewing skills on a back burner, thinking, well, you're either working in like this awful factory, it's perception, right? Or I got to find these other like better paying, higher end, office-y type of jobs. Yep. And unless you're like a high end designer, what money are you going to make? Like, I was very much overgeneralizing all these things. And it just so happened that I met someone who was doing bridal alterations and then had an injury and couldn't do them anymore.
So you took over.
And I said, I know how to work an industrial sewing machine. I don't know anything about bridal, but I can run the sewing machine. And I feel like I have good hand sewing skills. And I was very fortunate that she took me under her wing and was like, I'll just show you. And we started working together. And by the end of that season, I was doing the entire stream of the bridal alterations that were coming into her shop. And I felt wasn't quite fully ready, but I felt very confident in my ability to also do the customer service end of things. I could relate to the clients because they were more in my age demographic, and I could still run the sewing machine and do great handwork, and I felt amazing.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized, oh, this is a career. Like, there's nobody out here really doing this. The younger versions of me are fewer
And the best thing
farther
about
between.
it is it's your identity.
Absolutely.
And that's a big thing in this country. We look at it as a job.
Yeah.
A job. And some people take it as an identity.
Yeah.
And not going back to my past, but living in Italy and France, you really see these people who take this industry as their identity. And you come to America and it's a job.
Yeah.
And
It's a labor.
if you have a job and you don't have an identity, you should maybe look at what you should do, maybe do something different.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that, to your point, this is now your identity.
Yeah.
As opposed to, and this is something you could do forever.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, I feel like the last thing I do is sell clothing.
Yeah.
That, to me, it's like, that is the lowest thing on my priority. Everything else, connecting with the mill, connecting with the manufacturer, connecting with people. And I know all you people, and I can now
Put you all
together. And in the middle of that Venn diagram, we're going to make some clothing. But it's that larger look at it.
Yeah.
That
The
is
bird's
what
eye view of
is what
everything.
drives me forward. But Jacob, we've taken up way too much of your time. I feel like we could talk to you, but it's like
this could go on
be
for
one of those
days.
Joe Rogan episodes that's 4.5 hours long. But so some exciting things. So people can consume your wool through a couple different ways. One, through Bards. They can go to bardsclothing.com, and if somebody wants to get a garment, they can we have set it up so that way I can actually measure them and fit them at the mill, and they'll get if you think about everything that we've talked about, there's 3 garment manufacturers left in America. There's 4 mills left in America. The fact that you could get a garment made for you while getting measured at the mill, think about how one in a universal chance that is. It's unbelievable. It's beautiful. But then there's plenty of other brands that supply your
The user fabric.
Yep. And that's all listed on your website?
No, for the most part, you probably go through our social media. Yep. But again, a big part of what we're doing in the future is kind of partnering with a few of these cut and sew manufacturers to come out with something. A lot of people said, well, what is New England? And if you type into any search engine, New England apparel, stuff comes up for the Patriots. It's anything different than we're trying to promote.
That's hilarious.
So I think what we realized is maybe we need to go out there, because most of the cut and sew manufacturers that he referenced are still very very content to buy European fabrics.
Yeah.
So I think what we've done is kind of gone back and partnered with a few of these cut and sew operators and saying, okay, we're going to bring out a New England garment that represents the color palette, the weight, this flannel. And so that's kind of a work in progress right now. But to your point, our social media will highlight a lot of, we do what we can to promote our clients with the idea of one last thing. In 2018, 65% of our fabric went to China to be turned into a garment to come back here. 2022, 23, 24, 100% of what we make in that mill stays domestic.
Wow.
Nothing leaves the country, and or it will leave as an export within a consumer good. So the sport coat will be made in New York City with our fabrics sold at Brooks Brothers, Japan, or Beams, Japan. But for the most part, our fabric is part of a value proposition sold as an export, as opposed to a fabric going to Asia to turn into a garment. So it kind of shows that that is the current path we're taking, trying to promote these local brands that use our fabric.
I love it.
Amazing.
Jacob, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate just everything that you do. I mean, we haven't even gotten into it, your personal sacrifice of you committing to this and now moving to Hartford and everything that comes with that. So thank you so much for sitting down with us. Really appreciate you. And thank you to the listener for joining us for another episode of The Fabric of America.